What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. We're starting off the new week with some great news in college football. Deion Sanders has beaten cancer. He has missed majority of Colorado's offseason activities and practices due to a cancerous bladder tumor that his medical team, thankfully enough, was able to discover and remove before it got even more serious. Now we don't have any more setbacks that Coach Prime has to deal with that's going to keep him off the sidelines for Colorado this season, which is great news. The bad news from this is that the Big 12 is in trouble, because now with Deion Sanders having no more health issues that he has to deal with, Colorado is now walking into this season with an even better team than what they had last year. Despite of losing Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, Colorado is a more complete team this year, which gives them a great shot to win the Big 12 championship. They're going to be good on the line of scrimmage. This offensive line should be really good. They brought in a few transfer portal pickups that have multiple years being productive starters at their previous stops. You added Kalen Salters at quarterback, who's going to improve the rushing attack for Colorado, which has been the biggest weakness for this team under Deion Sanders. With Kalen Salters now, it forces defenses that have to adjust how they defend this team. Now you just can't worry about stopping the pass. Now you're going to have to put more guys in the box to deal with the running threat that Kalen Salters is. Deion also hired Marshall Faulk, NFL Hall of Fame running back, to be his running backs coach. So with that hiring, that should also boost the productivity that we see out of the running back position. And defensively, year two under defensive coordinator Robert Livingston, expect this side of the ball to take an even bigger step in improvement than what they did last year. Robert Livingston was one of the best assistant coaching hires that wasn't talked about, because before he took this job, Colorado had a non-existent defense. And in year one, calling plays for this defense, Colorado had a top 50 unit. And when he left Cincinnati, his loss was definitely felt, because their secondary play just completely fell off a cliff. So that tells you how good of a coach Robert Livingston is. And with an offense that's going to be better at running the football, they're going to be able to take more time off the clock, which is going to mean that the defense is going to be on the field for less plays, which gives them more time to catch their breath. They won't get fatigued as fast as what they have in years past. And that also is going to help the defense take an even bigger step in year two under Robert Livingston. The Big 12 is not a good conference to where you can just overpower a team because of talent. The talent discrepancy is pretty even among all these teams outside of Texas Tech, who spent $28 million on their squad. But just because you spend a lot of money, it doesn't guarantee that that money is going to turn into wins. Colorado has as good as a chance as anybody to win the Big 12 this year and to make it to the college football playoffs. And I'm hoping for a Deion Sanders, Bill Belichick first-round playoff game, because that will be cinema. Hollywood couldn't cook up something as good as that. You will have two guys that were successful in the NFL, one as a player, the other being arguably the greatest coach in the history of football, squaring off for the right to advance and keep their hopes of winning a national title alive. I'm praying for a Bill Belichick versus Deion Sanders CFP matchup. I don't know who wouldn't want to see that game. It will be one of, if not the biggest playoff game in the history of college football. And for Deion Sanders, now you put the rumors to bed that you are looking for an easy exit out of coaching. You lose Shedeur and Travis. You were having concerns allegedly about if you were going to be good enough to still coach this team to a good record. You were looking to take the Urban Meyer route out of coaching, which was proven to be false. But I saw that theory floated out there by a lot of haters. And with this cancerous bladder tumor being gone, Deion has no more health setbacks that Colorado has to worry about, at least for this upcoming season. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Deion and the Buffs do this year. They kick off week 1 against Georgia Tech. Right now, they are a small underdog heading into that game. Deion now being on the sidelines confirmed for that matchup. Let's see how that changes the odds and what that means for Colorado's chances to walk out of week 1 1-0. On Saturday, when I first woke up around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because I got a weird sleep schedule, the first thing I saw when I unlocked my phone was a message from my guy, College Football with Sam, about how Oklahoma is dead, not for this year, but long-term they're toast if they don't change their recruiting strategy. And at first, I was taken back by this. For one, wow, this was the first thing that I woke up to. Oklahoma is dead. And then I started looking into the recruiting strategy, looking at the recruiting rankings, which I'm not really somebody that keeps up with recruiting all that much, but I was a little shocked to see that Oklahoma currently has the 41st ranked recruiting class right now. And under Brent Venables, Oklahoma has recruited really well. Their last 2 classes have been pretty good. 2 years ago, they finished with a top 10 recruiting class. Last year, they finished 17th. So in terms of the next 2 years, I don't believe that recruiting is really something that's going to hurt Oklahoma from an on-the-field standpoint. Long-term, though, Oklahoma's recruiting strategy has some issues. They have a new general manager, Jim Nagy, who they hired a few months ago at the start of the offseason, who served as the director for the NFL Senior Bowl. And he's supposed to help Oklahoma's personnel department in terms of assembling the talent, helping in recruiting, manage the NIL budget. And the strategy that he's using for recruiting has some flaws with it. He doesn't view 5, 4, 3, and 2 stars differently. He views them just about as the same. He doesn't care about recruiting rankings. He doesn't care about the recruiting hype that guys are getting. He cares about what him and his scouting department see when they watch recruits on film. What does the tape show about these guys? And he's prioritizing finding hidden gems in recruiting, gems that go under the radar, that teams overlook because they're so focused on outbidding everybody for the 5 and 4 star guys. Jim Nagy could see a 2-star recruit and view him higher as a 5-star recruit. And from time to time, you find guys like Khalil Mack, Justin Jefferson, who weren't highly touted coming out of high school, and they blossom into not just really good college players, but all pro level players in the NFL. The chances of finding those kinds of players, though, are really low. And when you're playing in the toughest conference in college football, the SEC, your strategy in recruiting being that we rather have guys we don't have to overspend for, we don't have to get in the bidding wars for, is not a winning recipe for winning a SEC title, nor is it competing for a national championship. The last few national champions, not even the last few, spanning from over the last 2 decades, teams that have won a national championship have recruited at a top 10 level and have had a high blue chip ratio. Blue chip ratio is fancy terms for the amount of 5- and 4-star players that you have on your team. And Jim Nagy is essentially saying that we're going to try to budget how we spend our NIL money when it comes to unproven players out of high school, which I have no issue with. Oklahoma has a good NIL backing, but they don't have deep pockets to where a Miami, a Texas A&M have, which makes sense why Jim Nagy wants to take this approach. But this approach wins you championships in the ACC, the Big 12, and any other conference not named the Big 10 and the SEC. And the SEC talent is king. And you can't bank off out scouting and out evaluating everybody to win a championship in this league when you have Texas, your biggest rival, who recruits at a top 3 level every single season. Alabama, Georgia constantly bring in top 3 classes. LSU recruits at a top 10 level. In order to beat those teams, you got to have the talent necessary to do so. You can't rely on scouting and player development as a sure thing that can help you win a championship in this conference when there's a reason why teams spend so much NIL money in high school recruiting. Your counterpoint might be, well, just because a guy has a 5-star attached to his name doesn't necessarily guarantee that he's going to be a good player, which is correct. Over 60% of 5 stars or guys rated in the top 100 don't pan out. But what about the other 4-star guys that aren't in the top 100 that do? The SEC has been won by teams over the last decade who have recruited in the top 10. You can't rely on out-scheming everybody, being able to out-develop and out-evaluate people as a way that's going to find you consistent success in a conference that is dominated by teams that have elite recruiting, not just because of NIL, but also because you have staffs that are as good or better than what you believe your scouting department is that can find the right 5- and 4-star players to bid on. And if Jim Nagy's scouting and player evaluation skills are as good as what he believes they are, he should be able to find the 5- and 4-star guys worth getting in the bidding wars over. Because you can't comprise your roster majority of 3- and 4-star guys that you perceive to be hidden gems and think that's going to win you championships in this conference. It's an easy way to make you a consistent 7-5, 8-4. Occasionally you win 9-10 games. If Oklahoma is going to be a consistent factor in the SEC championship picture for years to come, you can't prioritize hidden gems, being frugal with your NIL money for the sake of trying to stretch out your funds because you don't want to get into bidding wars. You don't want to expend a lot of your NIL budget on unproven high school talent when the transfer portal is only good for filling up needs that you need to address right away. It's not a good long-term strategy saying that every year we're going to overturn our roster and rely on outbidding everybody for the best players out of the transfer portal. Look what happened to Florida State last season. The transfer portal did them in because they were trying to go about high school recruiting as something that was secondary while they leaned on the transfer portal as their primary source of constructing their roster. Look what's going to happen to Ole Miss this season. They're going to have the worst year that they've had over the past 3 years under Lane Kiffin because they have to somewhat rebuild. Using the transfer portal is not a feasible strategy in this conference. Georgia doesn't lean heavily into the portal. Neither does Alabama, Texas. The best teams in the SEC don't overindulge on the transfer portal to make up for the misses that they have in recruiting. And I would tell Jim Nagy that you'll have more misses trying to find hidden gems than what you will have going after 5 and 4-star guys. Somebody who gets a 5 and 4-star label attached to them means that they have great athleticism and they have high potential that can project to them being a high draft pick in the NFL. And sometimes those guys don't pan out, but the teams that are dominating this conference, that are dominating in the playoffs, are the ones who are able to properly evaluate those blue chip players. And they don't overly rely on trying to find hidden gems. The last time somebody came into the SEC with the mindset, we were going to find hidden gems, we were going to try to find under the radar guys and trust our development, was Brian Harsons at Auburn, and he got canned within 2 years as the head coach. And Auburn had one of the worst, if not the worst, recruiting class in the history of their program. And their new head coach right now, Hugh Freeze, in year 3 was under a lot of pressure because he had to overturn a roster with a fan base that always has really high expectations. You can't win in this conference prioritizing hidden gems over blue chip talent. You have to pay to win in this new age of college football, and you get what you pay for at times. If you want to try to win with a great value team that you assemble from the high school ranks, you're going to get great value results. If you're trying to win a national championship, you have to spend, or you have to recruit the same players that teams that are winning national championships are getting. There's a reason why teams spend so much in high school recruiting. Recruiting is the lifeblood of college football. It's not about the Jimmies and the Joes. Well, it's not about the X's and the O's. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes. They say that for a reason. You have a higher chance striking gold with a 5-4-star recruit than you do of a 3-2-star guy or less. And you're putting more pressure on yourself being Jim Nagy, trying to evaluate so good that all of these 3 low-end 4-star guys pan out. For every 3 4-star that you find, you're going to have a 5-star guy that becomes the difference maker, and you winning or losing the SEC title game, or you making it to the national championship. I'm a huge believer that prayer works unless you're praying on the fall off of Alabama football. Alabama going 8-4. How does that happen when they are tied with Ohio State for the highest blue chip ratio in college football entering this season? 89% of Alabama's roster this year is comprised of 4- and 5-star players. Kalen DeBoer has proven to be an elite coach. He went 4-1 against top 25 teams last year. The only issue is that Alabama played down the competition, but that shouldn't be an issue anymore. Alabama's mantra heading into this second season under DeBoer is they want to smash ants with a sledgehammer. And there were a bunch of issues that plagued Kalen DeBoer in his first season at Alabama that he has fixed this offseason. You have Ty Simpson at quarterback, who should be an upgrade from Jalen Milroe because he'll be better throwing the football, more consistent throwing the ball than what Jalen Milroe was. Jalen Milroe had some good games, but he also had some really bad games, and most of his bad games came against the worst teams that Alabama played that they ended up losing to. He didn't play good against Vanderbilt. He struggled against Tennessee, and he also played really bad against Oklahoma. Ty Simpson should be able to have more consistency through the air than what Alabama had last season with Jalen Milroe. The ground game should also be a huge strength of Alabama this year. You have Jam Miller, who's a breakout candidate for Alabama, who is really underrated. Very good patience, good vision, has really good acceleration. The offensive line is also going to be good as well because you have 3 NFL offensive linemen this year that are probably going to go within the first 3 rounds of the 2026 draft. And the biggest addition that Kalen DeBoer made to overhauling this Alabama offense was bringing back his tag team partner, Ryan Grubb. Ryan Grubb has been everywhere that Kalen DeBoer has had success at. And last season, you can tell that he was a little bit lost without Ryan Grubb at times. The play calling wasn't as good as what it was when he was with Ryan Grubb at Washington. Now with him reunited with his tag team partner, expect for Alabama to have one of the best offenses in college football this year. They also have a top 5 defense on paper. They're loaded everywhere. They should be way better getting pressure on the quarterback this season. You have a healthy Deontay Lawson coming back, one of the best linebackers in college football this season. You have what could be considered the best secondary in college football, Damani Jackson, potential first-round pick at corner. You have Zabian Brown, who should have been a first-team true freshman All-American last year. You have Keon Slag coming back fully healthy. Alabama this season, for them to win anything less than 9 games, they need nothing but disaster to happen to this program. They need a rash of injuries. They need Kalen DeBoer to forget how to be a good coach, and then some for this team to once again underachieve and miss the playoffs like how they did in Kalen DeBoer's first season. Alabama had some flaws stemming from Nick Saban's retirement that nobody really wants to talk about. Nick Saban could have possibly won just as many games last year as what Kalen DeBoer did. In Nick Saban's final season, he had to beat Auburn by a prayer. Then in the SEC championship, you beat Georgia, but you get into the playoffs and you lose to a goal line stand against Michigan, a team that you are more than capable of being able to win. Nick Saban, his final season at Alabama, he overcame a lot of cracks in the foundation that he built. And Alabama, in the final 3 years under Nick Saban, wasn't as dominant as what they were during the majority of his tenure down there in Tuscaloosa. But nobody really wants to acknowledge that because we overlook it due to the greatness of Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer won 9 games, which is the most wins that a first-year head coach has ever had in the history of Alabama football. And he lost more games year one at Alabama than he ever has had during the course of his career being a head coach, dating back to when he was winning national championships every year at the NIA level, back to when he was coaching at Washington. He never lost as much as what he did in 2024. So history tells us that Kalen DeBoer is primed for a huge season, year 2 at Alabama. History shows us that when Kalen DeBoer has a down season, which he's never had, it's not crazy to expect for Alabama to shake back in a major way under him. Kalen DeBoer, say what you want to about him playing down the competition, him not being the kind of disciplinarian that Nick Saban was. The guy knows how to win big games. He has beaten Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian. Over the last 3 years, Kalen DeBoer has assembled one of the best role galleries in college football in terms of the elite coaches that he has been able to reign victorious over. And when you give him a team this talented as what Alabama is heading into this season, not even prayer can make Alabama fall off this year. Ohio State's biggest concern going into this season as they look to go back-to-back is their new defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths with how tumultuous his time went as the head coach of the Detroit Lions. He was tapped to be this great, innovative defensive mind with all of the years of success that he had as Belichick's left-hand man, calling his defense. And when he went to Detroit, the defense not only wasn't good, but the team didn't perform the way many had hoped, being a Bill Belichick disciple. And with him now being the defensive coordinator of Ohio State, there's a lot of concern that the defense is going to drop off under him. The issue of Matt Patricia, though, is not an issue that Ohio State should really be too concerned about, because the last time I checked, Ryan Day is still the head coach, not Matt Patricia. Some guys are good coordinators and bad head coaches, because when you're a coordinator, you don't have to worry about your side of the football. Matt Patricia only has to worry about managing the defense. That's it. When you're a head coach, you get more responsibilities that are placed on you. You're not just worried about the particular area of the ball that you specialize in, but you also have to go into the offensive meetings and look at what the offense is doing, game plan for what the offense needs to do for an upcoming game. You have to worry about the personalities, managing the entire locker room. So there's a lot more responsibilities that a head coach gets that you don't have to worry about if you're just a coordinator. And some guys are bad head coaches, but great coordinators. Matt Patricia is one of those guys. He has one of the most accomplished resumes of any defensive coordinator in college football. The guy has coached some of the best defenses in the history of the NFL to Super Bowls. Bill Belichick disciples, the majority of the time, they don't work out as head coaches because they have a hard time connecting with team or connecting with the players on their team. And Matt Patricia, being a defensive coordinator, doesn't really have to be a player guy. Chip Kelly had the same reputation that Matt Patricia had. Just he was coaching the offense and not the defense. Chip Kelly wasn't a guy who was known to get along with players. He was just your typical X's and O's coach. And that's what made him so good as Ohio State's offensive coordinator and why he now is calling plays for the Las Vegas Raiders. The same thing could very much well happen with Matt Patricia. He does a great job calling the defense, and it's hard to do a bad job calling plays when you have still a loaded defense. Ohio State does lose a lot of talent on that side of the ball, but they recruit as well as anybody else in the country. You still have arguably the best player in college football on that side of the ball still in Caleb Downs. Matt Patricia gets the most out of guys that have the kind of skill set that a Caleb Downs has because he's a versatile chess piece on that defense. You can move him anywhere. He isn't just a safety, but he can play slot corner. He can be a nickel and dime linebacker. You can blitz him off the edge near the line of scrimmage. Belichick loves having players that have the skill set that Caleb Downs has. Bill Belichick, the scheme that he runs is no different from the scheme that Matt Patricia runs. And Matt Patricia has a bunch of different variations of his defense that he can run tailored towards the personnel that Ohio State has. There's not a better replacement that Ohio State could have found for Jim Knowles than Matt Patricia. He has the NFL resume that Ryan Day likes because the last time he had a defensive coordinator from the NFL ranks that did pretty good, it was Jeff Hafley. So Matt Patricia gets Ryan Day back to having an NFL mind calling plays for that side of the ball. And Michigan has had a lot of success with these defensive coordinators that run NFL-style defenses. And with the hiring of Matt Patricia, it's the same thing that helped out Michigan that can probably help out Ohio State still and maybe help turn the tide on the game. And I think that there is a possibility that Matt Patricia does a better job calling the defense than what Jim Knowles did. That may sound a little bit outrageous, but Jim Knowles doesn't have the catalog that Matt Patricia has of success at the highest level that there is in this sport. There's nobody else that has as deep as a resume as what Matt Patricia has. So using his NFL failures as an indictment on him as a defensive coordinator is just wrong because it's two different things. When you're a head coach, you have more responsibility. When you're a defensive coordinator, you only worry about calling that side of the ball. What could derail Georgia this season is Kirby Smart's loyalty to offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. Mike Bobo, Georgia fans wanted his head served on the silver platter last year with how the offense was just stuck in the mud all throughout the entirety of 2024. The play calling got really predictable with him just spamming bubble screens left and right. Georgia dropped from being top 10 in explosive plays to being 23rd in the country in that department. The ground game uncharacteristically wasn't good. The offensive line play wasn't up to standard from what you normally have grown accustomed to seeing the Georgia offensive line play at. And the wide receiver play was downright atrocious. You had a wide receiving core that led the nation in drops. And all of those issues get placed on the shoulders of Mike Bobo. Kirby Smart, however, though, instead of firing Mike Bobo, which is the thing that Georgia fans were hoping that he did, he decided to remain loyal to him and retain him as his offensive coordinator. And if Georgia's season once again falls short of a national championship and the offense is having the same issues that they did last year, then Kirby Smart's loyalty ultimately could be the kryptonite to Georgia once again winning another national championship. Mike Bobo, I'm going to go out on a limb and defend him. There's only so much that you can do calling plays when you have so much going against you. The offensive line didn't have the depth to overcome some of the injuries that they had to deal with, like when they lost Tate Ratledge for a few weeks. You also had a ground game that was unable to get going due to the injuries and the inconsistencies that Georgia had up front. And what can you possibly call as an offensive coordinator when you have wide receivers that have defensive backhands? Because when you have as many drops as what Georgia's receiving core did in 2024, essentially you wouldn't be wrong to believe that they had guys that should have been defensive backs. My high school coach used to always say, you can't play receiver if you can't catch the ball. You should be playing defensive back, because those guys don't really have good hands, which is why they play DB and not receiver. When you're an offensive coordinator and you're boxed in like how Mike Bobo was, with just so many things going against you as a play caller, there's only so much that you can scheme around that. Calling bubble screens probably gave Georgia the best chance in his eyes of getting yardage, because when your receivers can't be trusted to catch passes, what else can you do in certain situations? You get in third and long, you got a better chance converting with a wide receiver screen than what you do trying to hope and pray that one of your receivers can learn how to catch. Yes, Mike Bobo deserves a lot of responsibility for how bad Georgia's offense was at times last year. At the same time, you also have to admit that the personnel Georgia had last year on the offensive side of the football was not good. Players still have to go out there and make plays, which Georgia's receivers, Georgia's offensive line, Georgia's rushing attack was unable to do. As a play caller, you have the old Jerry Maguire quote, help me, help you. Mike Bobo puts the players in position to make plays. The players have to go out there and execute them. So for Kirby Smart, he sees the drops that Georgia had, the inconsistency with the offensive line play, the rushing attack not being good, and a quarterback in Carson Beck who you had to overly rely on to win you games, having more on his shoulder this year than what he had the previous season. It was right for him to retain Mike Bobo. It was right for him to stay loyal to Mike Bobo, because in 2023, Georgia had one of the best offenses in college football. You can't fire a guy because of one bad year. And at times, the play calling was a little bit as a scapegoat for Georgia fans to use instead of blaming the personnel. It's easy to blame the guy calling the plays and easy to overlook and not hold the guys who have to go out there and actually execute the plays that Mike Bobo calls accountable. Changing offensive coordinators, even if Georgia had the best offensive coordinator in college football last year, they still would have gotten the same results. The offense just wasn't good. When you got a quarterback that's giving out turnovers like he's Santa's helper, what can you do if you're a play caller? How much can you change your scheme? How much can you adapt the play calling when you just have players that can't execute? I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you the truth. Put yourself in Mike Bobo's shoes. What would you have called last year if you was Georgia's offensive coordinator with receivers that led the nation in drops, an offensive line that was inconsistent, protecting the quarterback and opening up holes on the ground, a ground game that was 103rd in rushing yards per game? What was Mike Bobo supposed to do? What would you have done differently for Mike Bobo? I want to know. I'm waiting for you guys to tell me in the comment section. For all of you who wanted Mike Bobo gone, what would you have done differently to overcome everything that Mike Bobo had to deal with, calling plays that was somewhat out of his control? I'm not saying that the play calling couldn't have been better, because it definitely could have. But there's only so much that you can do as a play caller to overcome execution problems. And that's what Georgia's offense had last year. Now, if Georgia's offense is still bad, you know what they say? Fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me two times, shame on me. And if Kirby Smart, his decision to remain loyal to Mike Bobo ends up hindering Georgia once again, it will be shame on him, and then it will be time to make a change. But Nick Saban, who was Kirby Smart's mentor, when he had a coordinator that was struggling, he never got rid of him after 1 year. It always took at least 2 or 3 years for Nick Saban to get rid of a guy. When Bill O'Brien was his offensive coordinator after Bryce Young left, what did Nick Saban do? He got rid of him. He said that we were too Bryce Young dependent. Got a new OC. Same thing with the defense. His defensive coordinator ended up leaving for Ole Miss, who was Pete Golding. People wanted Pete Golding gone. Nick Saban was extremely patient with his assistant coaches when he knew that the players weren't executing. There's only so much you can do. There's only so many plays that you can dial up if the guys aren't going out on the field and executing them to the best of their ability. Is Bill Belichick going to work in college football? It seems to be an odd fit that the greatest head coach in the history of football, who made his name, who became a legend in the NFL, randomly decided that he wanted to coach college kids. Belichick doesn't have the kind of personality that you think would mesh well with 18, 19, and 20-year-old young adults. But in this new age of college football, though, with NIL, the transfer portal essentially being the equivalent to NFL free agency, college football somewhat being pay to win, this is a perfect situation for Bill Belichick to be in. And college football is underestimating just how much success Bill Belichick is going to have in his first season as North Carolina's head coach. For one, he's coaching in the ACC. You don't need to have the Jimmys and Joes that Alabama and Georgia, Texas have to win this conference. North Carolina, when they hired Bill Belichick, they promised him that they would give him $20.5 million to use on this roster for this season. They also lowered the academic standards to make it easier for him to acquire talent as well. And he's not even the guy in charge of assembling this team. It's Michael Lombardi, who is a really brilliant NFL mind. With the squad that North Carolina has, that they have put together through the transfer portal, if Bill Belichick is still the great head coach that we believe him to still be, at least me, I don't know about you, North Carolina should easily be able to win 10 games. They don't have a difficult schedule. They have a team that, with them going up against 7 teams that finished with losing records in 2024, 5 teams that they play and ACC play that finished in the bottom half of this conference last year, they can easily out-roster most of the teams on their schedule. In terms of payroll, North Carolina is probably second to Miami in that department. North Carolina this season, year one under Bill Belichick, probably paid more money for this year's team than what Clemson has paid for their team, because Dabo Swinney isn't as big on paying players and going after guys in the portal as what Bill Belichick is. Bill Belichick, with a team this talented, should be able to steamroll through a conference like this. In this conference, you don't have a lot of elite quarterback play. You don't have a lot of teams that have elite athletes. So what's going to be the difference that separates Bill Belichick in North Carolina from the majority of the teams that they have to play on their schedule this year? Coaching. Bill Belichick's defense gave rookie quarterbacks a bunch of fits in the NFL. His defenses in college, can you imagine how many nightmares they're going to give quarterbacks? Quarterbacks haven't really seen the kind of defensive schemes that Bill Belichick is about to be throwing out there. Yes, they're going to be somewhat dumbed down because it's college and you can't use as many advanced plays, advanced terminology that you use in the NFL, but the defense won't be giving up 70 points to teams like James Madison, like what happened last year. And Bill Belichick should definitely improve a defense that has been one of the worst in college football over the last 3-4 years. With the elite coaching that North Carolina is going to have, along with them paying so much for their roster, they're going to be good enough to get the 10 wins, possibly make it to the ACC championship game. And if they're 11-1 going into that game and they take a second loss, there's still a chance that they get into the college football playoffs, depending on who they beat, when they beat them, and how the committee views them as far as the eye test goes. But you will have to think that ESPN will want to see Bill Belichick in the playoffs due to the ratings that would generate, due to the money that also would come with. So I could see the committee being a little bit biased towards North Carolina if they do end up being a double-digit win team. Because the committee, we already know that they have bias. They're biased towards the SEC. They have a little bit of bias towards the Big Ten. Why wouldn't they be biased towards ratings, which they also want to use as a criteria for how they evaluate teams? North Carolina, they got a good quarterback. They got some really good offensive linemen out of the portal. They got some pretty good pickups on defense as well. You don't need elite recruiting to win in the ACC. All you need is elite coaching, a guy who knows how to bring a team from scratch together, which is what Bill Belichick was accustomed to doing all the years that he was coaching in the NFL. There were years when the Patriots had to overturn a good amount of their roster, and you had a new face, you had a bunch of new faces that Bill Belichick had to coach. You are doubting Bill Belichick because you're still stuck in a traditionalist mindset that a guy who has no experience coaching this sport from the NFL is going to be an alien to it, when football is still football at the end of the day. The only difference between coaching in the NFL and college football now is that one is played on Fridays and Saturdays and the other gets played on Sundays. That's the only difference. And the traditionalists don't want to admit that because they still want to live in this bubble that college football is still the same sport that we've grown to love, when this sport has never been closer to the NFL than what it currently is right now. There is a path that if Bill Belichick is still the great head coach that we believe him to be from the NFL, that North Carolina has instant success this year. We saw Curt Cignetti, his first season last year at Indiana, have instant success at a program that success didn't really come that often at. Indiana was known as a basketball school. North Carolina is viewed as a basketball school that has a lot of potential as a football program because of the amount of money they have and the great resources that they have, but they've been unable to find a head coach who can take full advantage of all of those things. Bill Belichick is the coach to do that. Age is nothing but a number. Nick Saban was getting up there in age when he was coaching at Alabama and still was dominating the sport. I'm not saying that Bill Belichick per se is Nick Saban, but Nick Saban did model Alabama under how New England was structured by Bill Belichick. So Nick Saban learned a lot of what he did and implemented at Alabama from what he learned from Bill Belichick and how he built the New England Patriots up. College football is greatly underestimating just how good of a coach Bill Belichick still is. It's not really about the talent. If he was in the SEC, it would be a valid point. If he was in the Big Ten, I wouldn't think he would have that much success, but he's in the ACC. It's not hard to win in a conference that doesn't really have a lot of teams that recruit in the top 25 consistently, don't have the ability to spend what North Carolina was able to spend, and don't have a head coach with the accolades, the resume, and the prestige and knowledge that Bill Belichick brings to Chapel Hill. Florida State football isn't dead. Last season, they hit rock bottom. They went 2-10, which was arguably the worst season in the history of this program. But that doesn't mean that Mike Norvell can't pick this program up and help them rise from the pits of the abyss. They could win 8 to 9 games this season. It's not unrealistic to see that happening when you look at the good coordinator hires that Mike Norvell made. You hire Tony White as your defensive coordinator. Everywhere that Tony White has been, he's produced a top 25 defense or better. You got Gus Malzahn as your offensive coordinator. You give Gus Malzahn athletic dual threat quarterback and some really good running backs, he's going to cook for you on offense. When he had those good years that he had at Auburn, when he had Nick Marshall, Trey Mason at running back, he went to the national championship. I'm not saying that Florida State has that kind of personnel this year on offense, but they're not too far away from that. Tommy Castellanos is the perfect style quarterback that fits a Gus Malzahn scheme. You also have really good running backs. You could put me or you there at running back in a Gus Malzahn system, and we could produce, because for some reason, the guy just has the magic touch with running backs. Every running back that plays for Gus Malzahn always has elite production. You got Roydell Williams. You got Gavin Sawchuk, who 2 years ago in his final few games as a freshman at Oklahoma was going off. FSU is going to be a better coached team than what they were last year by a landslide. From a personnel standpoint, the changes that Florida State made to their approach with how they acquire talent out of the transfer portal, they're no longer getting guys solely based off potential, which is the mistake that they made last year. When you're evaluating guys off what they could be and you don't judge them for what they currently are, you're banking on your staff being able to help these guys reach their potential. You end up having the kind of season that Florida State did. Florida State realized why a bunch of their portal pickups from 2024 were unable to have a lot of production at their previous stops, because they simply weren't that good. So what did Mike Norvell change with his transfer portal strategy this year? Instead of going for potential, he went for a proven production. He's bringing in a bunch of offensive linemen that have several starts under their belt at their previous stops. You have guys that have proven production on the offensive line, guys that you know can at least be serviceable for you. Same thing at receiver. Squirrel White was really good at Tennessee, really good deep threat. Deuce Robinson could be Florida State's new Johnny Wilson. He can be that guy that you just throw the football up to if you're Tommy Castellanos, say F it, Deuce White somewhere down there, and he comes down with it. On defense, you got some really good pickups on that side of football as well. You got a guy or two that followed Tony White from Nebraska down to Tallahassee, and you got a bunch of young guys like KJ Kirkland that got a lot of playing time early into their careers that were really productive. And that's really huge for Florida State because the recruiting has not been that good as of late, mainly due to their inability to develop the guys that they get out of high school. So a guy like a KJ Kirkland is going to be really pivotal to the success that Florida State can have this year, because if he ends up having a really good year along with some of the other guys that they've gotten out of the high school ranks, it shows that Mike Norvell knows how to recruit and develop talent, which is what you got to have in order to be a stable program. Sometimes you got to take a few losses to take a few wins after. Sometimes you have to take 3 steps backwards to take 10 steps forward. And that's what last season was for Mike Norvell. Sometimes you win and sometimes you build character. 2024 was nothing but a character building moment for Mike Norvell and this Florida State program, because he realized you can't solely construct a team out of the transfer portal every single year. You got to have some continuity with your team. You got to have guys that are willing to die for that Seminoles logo. You got to have guys that when they put that uniform on, it means more than just a check. It means school pride. It means respect, because they take playing for Florida State personal. And you didn't see Florida State play with that attitude last year because they had a team full of a bunch of mercenaries. When you have guys that don't have the equity with your program, that guys that you recruited do, you're going to get the kind of results that Florida State did. You can't be portal or die like how FSU was last season. And that's what Mike Norvell realized, and that's what he cleaned up. Florida State this year isn't solely banking on a bunch of transfers working out. They're banking on guys that they got from the portal along with guys that they have recruited to work out now. The portal is good when you have a few areas of need that you have to address quickly if you want to be able to compete. It's not something that you solely rely on to build a team every single year. And that's why Florida State isn't dead. Because Mark Norvell, when he first took this FSU job, he had to rebuild it from the disastrous tenure of Willie Taggart. And eventually they went to 10 wins to winning the ACC, getting snubbed out of the playoffs. And they had that huge disastrous season in 2024. But I'm not going to judge Florida State solely based off last season. I'm going to base this program for what they do this season, which is why Florida State isn't dead, because they can still get the 8-9 wins, which would be a successful season considering they just went through the season from hell a year ago. And maybe they could be in the ACC championship. The ACC, you got Clemson, who we know is going to be there. Then you got everybody else. Florida State, why can't they make it to the ACC championship if their portal additions hit unlike last year? If their coordinator hires actually end up being home runs, which they are. I don't see Gus Malzahn and Tony White flaming out. Both of these guys have proven resumes along with the guys that FSU is bringing in from the portal. Florida State isn't dead, at least not quite yet. I got to see them have another bad season where they miss a bowl game to officially declare this program being dead and unrevivable unless they get a new head coach.